The warrior woman witnessed one human take on an army by himself and asked who he was in a distant galaxy. War had become the way of life for countless species. Among them was Elira, a warrior unlike any other. She led her squad through many battles, always emerging victorious. Her strength, intelligence, and fierce determination made her one of the most feared leaders in the galaxy. She had crushed armies, laid waste to cities, and earned the respect of countless alien races. Elira and her squad of elite soldiers had never faced an opponent they couldn't defeat. The galaxy they lived in was filled with power struggles, politics, and warfare. Empires rose and fell, each one vying for control over the vast reaches of space. Elira's people, the Zorathians, were warriors born to conquer and defend. Their reputation was unmatched, but Elira was different. She had always believed that true strength didn't come from raw power alone. It came from strategy, from knowing your enemy better than they knew themselves. She believed that to lead was to be prepared for any challenge, to face every enemy with the full weight of her knowledge and experience. Today, however, she felt a strange sense of anticipation. Her squad was about to engage with a human outpost that had been a thorn in the side of the Zorathian Empire for months. The humans, an upstart race, had managed to fight back in ways Elira and her people had not anticipated. Rumors swirled through the ranks that one human, in particular, had been taking down entire squads with little more than his wits and his bare hands. Some dismissed these tales as exaggerated myths, but Elira could feel something different in the air. She had learned to trust her instincts, and her instincts told her that today would be unlike any other battle. As Elira and her squad neared the human stronghold, she studied the terrain carefully. The landscape was rugged, the terrain difficult to navigate, but it wasn't the environment that worried her. It was the unknown. The human forces were not known for their advanced technology or superior numbers, yet they had managed to hold their ground against superior foes. And this lone human, this rumored warrior, had somehow become a symbol of resistance. Elira couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was going to be a turning point. Her squad was ready, as always. Each member of her team was trained in the arts of combat, their weapons honed to perfection. The Zorathians were known for their advanced technology, energy shields, plasma blades, and blasters capable of destroying entire buildings with a single shot. But Elira knew that weapons alone wouldn't win this fight. She had to understand her opponent, figure out what made this human different from the rest. As they approached the human outpost, Elira ordered her squad to split up and surround the area. They moved quickly, silently, their footsteps barely making a sound on the rocky ground. Elira, however, moved slower, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. She wanted to see the human before the battle began. She wanted to understand how he operated. Then, as if the universe itself had been waiting for the right moment, she saw him. Standing alone, just outside the gates of the outpost, was a human. His back was straight, his posture relaxed yet confident. He wasn't hiding behind walls or barricades. He wasn't waiting for reinforcements. He was standing there waiting for them. Elira studied him closely. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a simple tactical uniform. He didn't look like much, but there was something in his stance that made Elira pause. There was no fear in him, no hesitation. He stood as if he had been expecting her, as if he knew she was coming. Elira signaled for her squad to advance, and they moved forward in formation. But as they approached, the human didn't flinch. He didn't make a move to draw a weapon or prepare for an attack. Instead, he simply stood there, staring directly at them. His eyes locked with hers, and in that moment, Elira felt something strange, a sense of recognition. It was as if he knew her, as if he had been waiting for this encounter for far longer than she could comprehend. The rest of her squad was close now, and they were ready to strike. But Elira raised her hand, signaling them to hold. She wasn't sure why, but she wanted to learn more. She couldn't help but feel that there was more to this human than she had been told. More than the stories, more than the rumors. As her squad hesitated, the human finally spoke. His voice was calm, unbothered by the situation. "I assume you're here for the fight." Elira's eyes narrowed. "You seem calm." The human smiled, a small, knowing grin. "I've learned to be. A fight is just a part of life, isn't it?" Elira's heart skipped a beat. She had expected arrogance, defiance, or even fear. But this human, this lone warrior, spoke as if war was nothing more than a passing inconvenience. She had seen countless soldiers over the years, but none had ever shown this level of composure. None had ever appeared so unshaken. The human took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. Elira couldn't help but feel the weight of his gaze, as though he could see right through her, as though he knew exactly what was going through her mind. She felt an odd sense of respect for him, but she quickly pushed it aside. There was no room for weakness in battle, no room for hesitation. "I'll ask you again," Elira said, her voice steady. "Who are you?" The human didn't answer immediately. Instead, he simply stood there watching her. Elira could feel the tension rising, the anticipation in the air thickening. Then, with a soft chuckle, the human replied, "I'm just a human fighting to survive." The words hung in the air, almost mocking her, as though he had reduced her entire existence, her squad's existence, down to something so simple. Elira's mind raced. How could one human be so confident, so calm in the face of overwhelming odds? How could he stand alone, unarmed, against an entire squad of Zorathian warriors? She took a step forward, her instincts screaming at her to take action. But again, she hesitated. There was something about this human that made her think. Something that made her question everything she knew about strength, about power, about war. The battle had not even begun, yet Elira felt a sense of dread settle deep within her. She didn't know it yet, but this battle was going to change everything. Elira stood in front of the human, her eyes narrowed in curiosity. His calm demeanor unsettled her. She had faced enemies from all corners of the galaxy, from powerful alien warriors to advanced machines, but never had she encountered one like him. He didn't seem like a soldier. He didn't appear to be a master of any combat techniques she was familiar with. Yet there was something about the way he stood, so still, so confident, that made her question everything she thought she knew. Her squad was waiting for her command. They were ready to attack, ready to strike with the force of 1,000 warriors. But Elira felt something she had never felt before in a battle, hesitation. She couldn't explain it, but this human was different. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't worried. He was simply waiting. For a moment, Elira wondered if she had made a mistake. Perhaps the rumors were true. Perhaps this human was more than just a skilled fighter. She had always relied on her sharp instincts, and right now they were telling her that this battle might not be as straightforward as she had assumed. "Why are you here?" Elira asked again, her voice steady but softer now. She needed to understand. What could possibly drive this human to stand against the might of the Zorathians? What kind of warrior would be foolish enough to take on a squad of elite soldiers, knowing the odds were stacked so high against him? The human didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step forward. Elira's heart skipped a beat as she instinctively reached for her blade. But the human didn't make any aggressive moves. He simply kept walking, his eyes locked onto hers. There was no hesitation in his steps, no fear in his face. He was moving toward her, and he seemed to know exactly what he was doing. Elira's squad shifted nervously behind her. They were used to following her lead without question, but now they were unsure. This wasn't a normal situation. The human had already taken down several of their best soldiers, and yet here he was, walking straight toward their leader without any visible weapon, no shield, no armor. He was relying solely on himself. "Are you so sure of yourself?" Elira asked, her voice colder now, as if trying to push him to show something. She wanted to see what kind of strength this human had. She needed to understand what made him so bold. The human stopped just a few feet away from her. The tension between them was thick enough to be cut with a knife. Elira could feel the weight of his gaze on her, as if he was reading her thoughts, studying her every move. His expression remained unchanged. "I've faced death 100 times," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It doesn't scare me anymore. What scares me is not knowing who I'm fighting for." The words hit Elira harder than she expected. She had heard warriors speak of battle and death, but there was something in this human's words that made her pause. This wasn't a soldier who fought for glory or power. This was someone who fought for something else, something deeper. It made her wonder what kind of life he had lived, what kind of world he had come from. "Who do you fight for?" Elira asked, her voice quieter now, almost gentle. The human's eyes softened for the briefest moment before he looked at her, his face suddenly serious. "I fight for those who can't fight for themselves. I fight for the ones who have been forgotten, the ones who have no voice." Elira's mind raced. This human wasn't just a warrior, he was a symbol of resistance, of defiance. She had never faced anyone like him before. The Zorathian Empire had always been about power, about control. They crushed their enemies underfoot without hesitation. But this human, this one man, stood alone, and his strength didn't come from his weapon or his technology. It came from his heart. "You're a fool," Elira said, trying to mask the respect that was beginning to form within her. "You cannot win against an army. You cannot defeat us all. No matter how strong you are still just one man." The human smiled, and for the first time, Elira saw something other than calmness in his eyes. There was a glimmer of something more, a fierce, burning determination. He was ready. He wasn't going to back down. "You're wrong," the human replied. "It's not about defeating you, it's about standing up when everyone else is afraid too." Elira's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her squad readying their weapons. The tension in the air was palpable now, the soldiers on edge, waiting for their leader's command. Elira knew that the battle was about to begin, whether she was ready for it or not. But she couldn't help the growing feeling that this fight was no longer about victory or defeat. It was about something much more personal. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. "Then let's see if your resolve is enough to save you," she said, her voice low but steady. She was ready to fight. She had no choice but to fight. The human didn't flinch. "I'll fight until I can't anymore. I've come this far, I'm not stopping now." The squad behind her began to move, taking positions as they readied themselves for battle. Elira could see the determination in their eyes, the eagerness to prove themselves once again. But for some reason, Elira felt uncertain. It was as though the human had already won, even if he didn't realize it. He had gotten under her skin, made her question everything she thought she knew about war, about strength. Elira drew her blade and turned to face her squad. "We end this now," she commanded. The warriors responded with a unified battle cry, charging forward in perfect synchronization. But the human didn't move. Instead, he stood there watching them approach with an almost serene expression on his face. Elira's squad rushed toward him, weapons drawn, ready to strike. She could see the precision in their movements. The battle had begun, and it would end quickly, she thought. They would overpower him, as they had done with so many others before him. However, the moment they reached him, Elira realized something that took her completely by surprise. The human was not reacting the way she had expected. He wasn't rushing into the fight, fighting back with force. Instead, he moved with a strange kind of grace, dodging, weaving between them with unnatural speed and precision. One by one, her warriors fell back, disarmed, surprised by how easily the human anticipated their every move. Elira watched in awe, her heart pounding as she saw what he was capable of. This was no ordinary soldier. This was something else entirely. In a matter of minutes, the battlefield had shifted. The human wasn't just surviving, he was outmaneuvering them. Elira's squad, once unstoppable, was now disoriented and struggling to keep up with his movements. She had never seen anything like it. The human turned to face her. "Is this what you call an army?" he asked, his voice quiet but filled with strength. Elira didn't answer. She was too stunned to speak. She had underestimated him. She had thought this would be another easy victory, another battle to add to her list of conquests. But she had never fought anyone like this before. The human had shown her a side of war that she had never considered. And now it was too late to turn back. Elira stood frozen for a moment, her mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Her squad, once the most fearsome force in the galaxy, was now scattered and disoriented. The human had done what no one had ever done before. He had made them look weak. He had outmaneuvered them, defeated them without even needing to draw a weapon. The warrior woman felt a sense of frustration building inside her, but more than that, she felt something else, a deep, unsettling respect. The human, Marcus, had not only survived but thrived in a situation that should have been impossible for someone of his kind. He didn't rely on advanced weapons or technology like the Zorathians. He didn't even need an army. He fought with nothing but his own skill, his mind, and his incredible will. Elira had never encountered a soldier like him, and that thought both fascinated and troubled her. As the last of her squad members regrouped, Elira realized that they had no choice but to change tactics. They couldn't fight him the way they had fought everyone else. This human had proven that traditional strength and overwhelming numbers were not enough to win. Elira needed to think differently. She needed to outsmart him. But the question kept nagging at her. How could one human be so powerful? "Regroup," she shouted, her voice commanding, though it trembled slightly. "Prepare for a different approach." The warriors of her squad, battered but not broken, nodded and began to form ranks again. But it was clear that the fear they had once carried into battle was now replaced with doubt. They didn't know how to fight this human, and Elira could feel their uncertainty. It wasn't just the loss of their comrades that shook them. It was the realization that they had underestimated their opponent in a way that had cost them dearly. Marcus watched them carefully, his eyes scanning the battlefield. His movements were calm and calculated, every step taken with purpose. He wasn't celebrating his victories, he wasn't taunting them, he was simply waiting for them to make their next move. Elira gripped her blade tighter. This had to end now. She could not allow herself to lose, not like this. Her squad was relying on her. She was their leader, and she had never failed them before. But this human, he was unlike anything she had ever faced. He wasn't just fighting to win, he was fighting for something deeper. And Elira, for the first time in her life, wasn't sure if she had that same conviction. "Stay close," Elira ordered, signaling to her remaining soldiers. She had to bring the fight to him to take back control. They could no longer afford to be reactive. They had to attack together as one unit to overwhelm him. If they were going to win, they needed to push forward as a force that was too powerful to defeat. With a sharp signal, the Zorathian warriors surged forward, charging towards Marcus. They moved with practiced precision, their weapons raised, energy shields in place. But Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't even seem concerned. Instead, he simply watched as they approached. Elira led the charge, her blade crackling with energy, her eyes locked onto Marcus. She would be the one to end this. She would prove to him that strength wasn't just about skill or will, it was about dominance, about power. The Zorathians had always been the strongest, and she would show him that he had no chance. The moment they closed the distance, Elira struck. Her blade swept down with lightning speed, aiming directly for Marcus. But in a move so fluid it almost seemed unnatural, Marcus sidestepped her attack, his body moving with a grace Elira had never seen before. He didn't hesitate, didn't waste a single motion. As Elira recovered and prepared for another strike, Marcus was already behind her, his hand grabbing her arm and twisting it with such force that her weapon was wrenched from her grip. Elira's heart raced as she spun around, trying to face him. But before she could react, Marcus was on the move again. He was everywhere at once, his movements so fast and precise that it was impossible to keep up. He didn't strike with power or brutality, he struck with precision, with intelligence. Each movement was a calculated decision, designed to exploit the slightest weakness in her defenses. Her squad, once confident, was now in disarray. They tried to attack in coordinated strikes, but Marcus was already a step ahead. He dodged and weaved through their ranks, his eyes never leaving them, his focus unwavering. One by one, the Zorathians fell back, their attacks ineffective against his incredible speed and strategy. Elira's frustration turned to something darker. She had never felt so helpless, so outmatched. The human wasn't just stronger than they had anticipated. He was smarter, more adaptable, more in tune with the flow of the battle than any of them. Finally, Elira managed to regain her footing. She stood tall, her eyes narrowing with determination. She was the leader of this squad, and she would not be defeated by one human. She would not let him diminish everything she had worked for, everything she had fought to build. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice booming across the battlefield. "We fight as one, together." Her squad, though uncertain, responded to her command. They rallied behind her, their weapons raised again, their shields now forming a tight, impenetrable wall. Elira could see the doubt in their eyes, but she knew they had no other choice. If they couldn't defeat this human together, they wouldn't defeat him at all. They advanced once more, but this time their movements were synchronized. They attacked as one, each warrior covering the others, keeping their formation tight. Elira was at the front, her focus entirely on Marcus, watching for any sign of weakness. She could see the sweat on his brow, the exhaustion beginning to show in his eyes. This was her chance. But just as she moved in for the final strike, something unexpected happened. Marcus, instead of retreating or dodging as he had before, stopped. He stood perfectly still, his chest rising and falling with each breath. His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, Elira saw something in his gaze that made her hesitate. It wasn't fear or even determination. It was acceptance. "I don't need to win," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "I just need to show you that I can fight." Elira paused, her sword still raised, confusion flashing in her mind. Was this it? Was he giving up? Or was this another tactic, another strategy to throw her off balance? But before she could make sense of it, the ground beneath them began to rumble. A loud, low sound filled the air, a deep vibration that seemed to come from the very heart of the planet itself. Elira looked around, startled, and then turned her eyes back to Marcus, who seemed completely calm, unaffected by the tremors. "What is this?" Elira demanded. Marcus gave a small, rueful smile. "It's not about us, it never was. You've been fighting for control, for power. But that's not the only thing that matters." The ground shook again, harder this time, and Elira's focus broke for just a second as she looked around, unsure of what was happening. Was this a trap? Was this the real plan? Before she could react, the sky above them darkened and a new sound, louder, more frightening, echoed in the distance. The human wasn't just a warrior, he was something more. And Elira had yet to understand the true depth of his strength. The ground trembled again, this time with more force. Elira's eyes darted around, searching for the source of the rumbling. Her warriors, still regrouping after the intense struggle with Marcus, were now looking at her with uncertainty. She could feel the tension rising among them. The battle had already shifted in ways she hadn't anticipated, but now something more, something even bigger seemed to be unfolding. The sky darkened further, the air thickening with an unfamiliar weight. Elira's instincts were sharp, always guiding her in moments like this. And right now, they told her to stay alert, to watch every detail. She could see Marcus standing before her, calm as ever, his expression almost unreadable. He hadn't moved, hadn't reacted to the rumblings beneath them. There was no fear in his eyes. If anything, there was a quiet certainty, a belief that whatever was happening was not just a twist in the battle. It was part of something much bigger. "What's happening?" Elira asked, her voice firm, but there was an edge of uncertainty. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up toward the darkened sky. His gaze seemed far away, as if he were listening to something only he could hear. Elira could feel the weight of his silence pressing on her, but she didn't back down. She was a leader, and leaders didn't show weakness, even when they didn't have all the answers. "It's not about us," Marcus finally said, his voice low as though speaking to himself. "This battle, it's just a part of something much bigger." Elira frowned, her grip tightening on her blade. "What do you mean?" she demanded. "You've already made your point, you've outmaneuvered us, you've proven you can fight. But this," she gestured to the rumbling earth beneath them, "this is not something I've prepared for." "What is happening?" Marcus turned his head slowly toward her, his eyes meeting hers with a calmness that only intensified the uncertainty swirling inside her. "What you're feeling right now," he said, "is the ground beneath us reacting. This world isn't just a battlefield. It's alive." For a moment, Elira didn't understand. She glanced around, scanning the terrain, the mountains in the distance, the thick clouds overhead. It all seemed normal, nothing out of the ordinary, until the next tremor shook the ground beneath her feet. The sound was deep, like the growl of some ancient beast awakening from a long slumber. Elira felt the vibrations through her bones, a low, humming frequency that seemed to echo in her chest. Her squad was on edge, their weapons drawn, ready to fight, ready to defend themselves, but they couldn't see what they were fighting. "This world, it's alive," Elira whispered, more to herself than to Marcus. She couldn't comprehend what he was saying. "How could a planet be alive?" Marcus nodded, his face now somber. "Yes, this isn't just a place to conquer or destroy. This is a living, breathing entity, and it's reacting to the violence you brought here." Elira's heart skipped a beat. She had never heard anything like this. Planets could be rich in resources, full of life, and the homes of many species, but a living, breathing planet. That was something new, something she couldn't even begin to understand. She had been so focused on the battle, on defeating the human and taking control, that she hadn't considered the possibility that the planet itself could be involved in the conflict. The next rumble was even stronger. Elira stumbled slightly, her feet sliding against the shifting ground. She heard shouts from her soldiers as they fought to stay steady. In the distance, the ground cracked open, a deep fissure appearing where there had been solid earth moments before. A plume of smoke and dust rose from the split in the land, and Elira could see the earth itself shifting as if it were alive, stretching and moving in ways that were unnatural. "What is this?" Elira demanded, her voice rising in frustration. "Why is this happening?" "We came here to fight to win, not to deal with this." Marcus's face remained calm, but there was something in his eyes, something far more serious than anything he had shown before. "You don't understand, do you? This world doesn't belong to you. It never did." It's not a battlefield for your empire to conquer. It's not here for you to take. You've disturbed it, and now it's reacting. Elira's mind raced. She had seen many battles, faced countless enemies, but this was something completely different. It wasn't just the human in front of her that she had to worry about anymore. It was the very planet she was standing on. She turned her head toward her squad. Her warriors were trying to regain their balance, but the tremors were relentless, shaking them with every passing moment. They couldn't fight like this. They couldn't even stand their ground. She could see the fear in their eyes as the ground continued to crack and shift. They were no longer facing a single opponent. They were fighting something much bigger, much more powerful, and much more dangerous. "This is your doing," Elira said, her voice cold and accusatory. "You brought this upon us." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, I didn't do this. But I knew it would happen. You've come here to destroy, to conquer. And now the world is fighting back." Elira's mind struggled to process what he was saying. She had always believed in strength, in power. She had always believed that the strongest would win. The Zorathian Empire had crushed countless enemies with sheer force, with overwhelming numbers and advanced technology. But this wasn't a fight she could win with weapons. It wasn't a battle of strength anymore. The ground itself, the planet they were standing on, was now their enemy. The earth shook again, even more violently this time. Elira stumbled, falling to her knees as the ground cracked open beneath her. She could hear her squad shouting in panic, some of them falling into the widening crevices. The air was thick with dust and smoke, and the ground beneath her seemed to be shifting, as though the entire planet was coming alive, fighting back against the invaders. Elira managed to push herself up, her breath coming in short, frantic bursts. She had to keep control. She had to lead her squad to safety, but her mind was clouded. She didn't know how to fight a planet. She didn't know how to fight something that wasn't a warrior, wasn't a soldier. What were they supposed to do? Marcus stepped forward, walking through the trembling earth as if he were immune to the chaos around him. He didn't seem frightened, didn't seem to care about the destruction happening all around them. His calmness was unnerving. "You can't fight it, Elira," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the noise of the world shaking. "You have to leave. The planet doesn't want you here." "It never did. You've disturbed something ancient, something far beyond your understanding. You can't win this fight." Elira's eyes burned with frustration, but she couldn't deny the truth of his words. She had always relied on strength, but this was something she couldn't defeat. She could see it in the way the land shifted beneath her, the way the earth seemed to roar in defiance. It wasn't just about fighting anymore. It was about survival. "Leave," Marcus repeated, his voice firm. "If you stay, you'll only destroy yourselves." Elira stood up, her mind racing. She had always been in control, always led her warriors with confidence. But now, for the first time, she felt lost. The power she had relied on, the strength that had made her the leader she was, meant nothing here. The planet was alive, and it was not on her side. With a final glance at Marcus, Elira turned to her squad. "Retreat," she ordered, her voice heavy with the weight of the decision. "We leave now." The soldiers hesitated for a moment, still stunned by the chaos surrounding them, but Elira's command was final. One by one, they began to retreat, moving back from the trembling ground, trying to find a way out. Elira stayed at the front, her eyes fixed on Marcus for a moment longer. He hadn't moved, hadn't even flinched. As the squad retreated, Elira felt the weight of her failure. She had come here to conquer, to win. But the world itself had shown her that some things couldn't be defeated by strength alone. She had underestimated this planet, underestimated Marcus, and now she was paying the price. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. The battle for this planet wasn't over. It had only just begun. The ground was still shaking, but now Elira could feel it deep in her bones. The planet beneath her, once a solid and familiar battlefield, was no longer something she could control or predict. It was alive, angry, and unwilling to be subdued. As she and her squad retreated through the shifting land, her mind raced, trying to grasp the enormity of the situation. She had always believed in strength, strength in numbers, strength in technology, strength in herself. But now she was faced with something more powerful than anything she had ever encountered. A force that could not be crushed, no matter how strong she was. The planet, the very land beneath her feet, had risen up against her. Her warriors were scrambling, their weapons now useless against the overwhelming power of nature. They were struggling to stay steady as the earth cracked open beneath them, large fissures swallowing anything in their path. Dust and smoke filled the air, and the sky above was thick with dark clouds, as if the world itself was closing in on them. Elira could hear the sounds of her soldiers shouting, their voices filled with panic. They were trained for combat, for war, but this was beyond anything they had ever trained for. "Stay together," Elira shouted, trying to keep her voice strong, but even she could hear the uncertainty in her tone. She was a leader, and she had always known what to do. But right now, nothing made sense. She had no idea how to stop the planet from fighting back, no idea how to regain control. She had lost everything, the battle, her confidence, and her sense of certainty. Marcus's words echoed in her mind. You can't fight it. He had been right. They couldn't fight the planet. They couldn't defeat something that was alive, something that had its own will. She had come here to conquer, to dominate, to prove her strength, but she had miscalculated. She had underestimated both the human and the planet. As the soldiers continued their retreat, Elira's thoughts kept returning to Marcus. He had told her to leave. He had warned her that the planet didn't belong to the Zorathians, that it wasn't a battlefield to conquer. Elira had never been one to listen to warnings, but she couldn't ignore what was happening now. The planet was fighting back, and there was no way to stop it. She looked over her shoulder and saw Marcus still standing where she had left him, calm and unmoving, as if he were completely at peace with the chaos around him. He wasn't running. He wasn't even trying to escape. Elira wondered if he had already accepted what was happening, if he had known all along that the battle wasn't about fighting for dominance but about survival. As her squad moved further back, Elira's mind began to shift. She had always believed that war was about victory, about defeating your enemies and proving your superiority. But now, she saw something else. She had come to this planet expecting to conquer it, to control it, but she hadn't considered the possibility that the land itself could fight back, that the very force she had sought to dominate could resist her. She stopped for a moment, her feet sinking into the unstable earth beneath her. The ground continued to tremble, but she didn't move. For the first time, she allowed herself to think. She wasn't sure if it was the right time, but she knew she had to change her approach. The old ways, the methods that had worked for so long, were no longer enough. She had to rethink everything. She had to learn from this. The planet wasn't just a battlefield. It was a living, breathing entity, and it had its own power. And that power was not something that could be controlled or conquered by brute force. Marcus had shown her that. He had fought not with weapons or strength, but with something deeper, something she couldn't quite understand yet. He fought with conviction, with heart. He fought for something greater than himself, and that was what had allowed him to survive in the face of overwhelming odds. Elira had always believed that strength came from the power of her weapons, from the technology at her disposal, but now she saw that true strength came from something else, something beyond the surface. "Elira, we have to move," one of her warriors shouted, snapping her back to reality. She nodded quickly, realizing that the planet wasn't going to stop. If they didn't escape, they would all be consumed by it. They had already lost the battle, but there was still a chance to survive. "Keep moving," Elira barked, rallying her troops once again. They couldn't stay here. They couldn't let the planet swallow them whole. But even as they fled, Elira couldn't help but feel a sense of defeat. She had led them into a battle they couldn't win. She had failed, and there was no way to undo the damage that had already been done. The Zorathian Empire had never faced a force like this, and she had no idea how to stop it. As they continued their retreat, Elira glanced back at Marcus once more. He was still standing there, unshaken, unaffected by the chaos around him. He wasn't running. He wasn't even moving. He was simply watching. It was as if he had known this would happen all along. As if he had known that the planet itself would rise up to defend itself, and that no amount of force could change that. Finally, as Elira and her squad reached the edge of the battlefield, she turned to face the direction they had come from. The land was still shifting, still cracking and groaning under the pressure of the battle. But the tremors were slowing now, and the rumbling had turned into a low, ominous hum. It was as if the planet had gotten its message across, as if it had shown the Zorathians that they could not simply conquer and take. There was a cost to what they had done. Elira took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had failed. But there was still a chance to learn from this, to change her approach, to find a new path. She had come here to conquer, to prove her strength, but now she understood that true strength wasn't just about defeating your enemies. It was about understanding the world around you, respecting it, and learning to live in harmony with it. As the dust began to settle, Elira made a silent promise to herself. She would return, not to conquer, but to understand. She would learn from the mistakes of this battle and return stronger, wiser, with a new respect for the planet, and for the human who had shown her that there was more to strength than what she had believed. Marcus had been right all along. This battle wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about survival, about learning to adapt and respect the world around you. Elira had learned that lesson the hard way, but it was a lesson she would never forget.